So today we're going to talk about the 228 incident. It's a story about a national trauma, one that was kept silent for decades. But, and this is the important part, it's also the story of how confronting that silence really became the bedrock of Taiwan's journey to the vibrant democracy we see today.
All right, so here's how we're going to break it down. We'll start with this moment of huge hope that pretty quickly turned into disappointment. Then we'll see how one single tiny spark set the entire island on fire with protests. We're going to have to look at the devastating human cost of the crackdown that followed, and then we'll talk about the long, silent decades after, and finally, how that painful memory actually helped forge the path to democracy.
You know, to really get why things just exploded in 1947, we have to go back a little bit and feel the vibe of the time. It was this period of incredible optimism that, well, it soured really fast.
Okay, so just picture it. It's 1945. World War II is over. After 50 years under Japanese colonial rule, Taiwan is being handed over to the Republic of China. People were genuinely excited. I mean, you can see it here. The streets were packed with people waving flags, totally buzzing with this promise of freedom, of self-rule, of being treated as equals.
But that dream, it fell apart almost right away. What they expected was a say in their own government. What they got was an administration that many felt was corrupt and just there to take what it could. Locals were pretty much shut out of powerful jobs. The island's resources, like rice and sugar, were being shipped off to the mainland to fuel the Civil War, which led to crazy shortages and hyperinflation at home. So instead of freedom and equality, what they got was conflict and a harsh new reality.
So you've got all this frustration just bubbling right under the surface. All that anger was just waiting for something to set it off. And that spark came from what seemed like a really minor incident, but it became the flashpoint for an entire island.
And here's where it happened. February 27th. An agent from the State Tobacco Monopoly Bureau confronts a widow selling untaxed cigarettes. Things get heated, and he hits her over the head with his pistol. A crowd gathers, they're angry, and in the chaos, an agent fires into the crowd and kills a bystander. The next day, February 28th, thousands of furious protesters march to the Governor General's office, and guards open fire on the unarmed crowd. After that, it was like a wildfire. The anger just exploded across Taiwan.
But look, this wasn't just mindless rioting. In the middle of all this uprising, people organized. They formed committees to maintain public order, and they put together a list of clear demands to give to the government. And if you look at them, they weren't calling for revolution. They were asking for really basic democratic reforms. End corruption. Give us more say in our own affairs. Let Taiwanese people hold public office. They were trying to solve the problem, not make it worse. The government's response, though, wasn't negotiation. It was force. Reinforcements were sent over from mainland China, and what happened next was a brutal island-wide crackdown they called the Qingxiang, or clearing the countryside. The human cost was just staggering.
This quote, man, it just perfectly captures the silent trauma that hung over families for generations. It's from the grandson of a very famous painter, Chen Tsung-po. He talks about growing up seeing this fierce-looking portrait on the family altar and being scared of it, but no one ever told him why. Why did his great-grandfather have a photo, but his grandfather only had this drawing? The truth was just too dangerous to even whisper.
And the story of Chen Tsung-po himself is just heartbreaking. He wasn't some radical. He was a celebrated artist, a respected city councilor. He actually stepped up to be a peace negotiator, thinking he could help calm things down. He went to the military base to mediate, but instead of talking, they arrested him, tied him up with ropes, paraded him through the streets, and then publicly executed him.
And tragically, he wasn't alone. The crackdown systematically went after Taiwan's best and brightest. We're talking about doctors, lawyers, judges, scholars, politicians, the very people who could have led a peaceful democratic transition. They were rounded up, many were tortured, killed, or just disappeared. This wasn't random violence. You could call it the decapitation of a generation of Taiwanese leaders. And the 228 incident wasn't the end. Not at all. It was actually the beginning of a much darker chapter for Taiwan, a long period of intense political suppression that would cast a shadow over the island for almost 4 decades. 2 years later, in 1949, the Kuomintang government, having lost the Chinese Civil War, retreated to Taiwan, and one of the first things they did was declare martial law across the entire island.
This was the official start of what everyone now calls the White Terror. So what did martial law mean? Well, for 38 years, the Constitution was basically suspended. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, gone. Talking about the 228 incident was absolutely forbidden. It was a dangerous taboo. Books were banned, songs were censored, and thousands of people were jailed or even executed for anything that was seen as dissent. A deep, enforced silence fell over the whole island. But here's the thing. Even in that crushing silence, the memory of 228 and that desire for democracy, it never completely died. In fact, that painful history became this powerful underground current that fueled the fight for change.
This timeline really shows you what a long, hard road it was. I mean, look at the dates. Decades passed. But slowly, the democracy movement grew. You have key moments like the Kaohsiung incident in 1979, where major activists were arrested, but that just made the public more determined. Finally, under all this pressure, the government lifted martial law in 1987. And then, less than 10 years later, Taiwan hits this incredible milestone, its first ever direct presidential election.
So, once democracy arrives, what do you do with this painful past? Well, Taiwan began the slow, difficult work of reconciliation. The government issued official apologies, memorials and museums went up. February 28th became a national holiday, Peace Memorial Day. And, maybe most importantly, official reports were finally published, bringing the full, difficult truth out into the open for the first time.
So it really all comes down to this question, right? How does a society take a past that is so painful and use it to build a stronger, more democratic future? The story of 228 gives us a pretty powerful answer. It suggests that a nation's commitment to freedom isn't forged by trying to forget its darkest hours, but by having the courage to face them head-on. That journey from silence to finally being able to speak was brutal, but it's exactly that journey that has shaped the resilient, free, and open society that Taiwan is today.